All right, so I'd like to call the Historic Preservation Board to order Wednesday, January 26th at 5:06 p.m. Could I please have the roll call?
Board Member Moore, Board Member Blake. Here. Board Member Cordaway.
Here. Board
Member Walter. Board Member Fulkus.
Here. All right, we do have a quorum and exciting that we have a new board member. So Rob, if you wouldn't mind, I know we've seen news about you, but we haven't actually seen you. Actually, I guess Susan, met you in person. I haven't had a chance to meet you in person, but for the rest of the board and for the public, if you would give us a little snippet about yourself, how you became interested in the board, and kind of any other personal items you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Rob Cordaway. This is my first meeting with the Historic Preservation Board. I'm a career banker. A lender to primarily technology companies. Been doing it for a little over 20 years. Came to the Bay Area for college. Went to Santa Clara University, grad school at the University of San Francisco. Economics being my thing, and what drew me to this was history always fascinates me. I lived in Campbell for 15 years now. Awesome city, and I love the history that is here, and wanted an opportunity to be of service to the city I live in, and so that's why I reached out to Sergio and asked if there were any opportunities, and he recommended this one, and you know, I'm excited and hopefully can lend an analytical mind to looking out for the best interest of the city and particularly its residents. So thank you.
Wonderful. Welcome aboard. I think I'm the second newest member. I've been on for a long time, but Susan, I think, holds the record. She's been on it. So the institutional knowledge you need is right here. And one thing you'll see about this board is it's a very working board. There's a lot of things we do in reviewing projects and things, but there's also a lot we do on our own time in the city to promote history, you know, to look for new structures that we can add to the inventory, to, you know, do a lot of research and things that staff doesn't have time for. So you'll find it's a very close board. It's a very working board, and obviously, as you said, Campbell has a lot to offer. I sit on the historic preservation group in Cupertino, and you know, if you compare these two adjoining cities, Cupertino and Campbell, we just have so much here that a lot of the valley cities don't have. So so I think you'll enjoy it.
And we certainly do. And the activities that, you know, we can be involved with outside, including taking a walking tour of the city, you know, the history of the city. There's an app available for that. There's information online, and you can, it's kind of like walking through Disneyland. You can take a nice tour and see a lot of cool stuff. And you know, it's a pleasure to be a part of this, to be, you know, a resident of the city. So awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So yes, and that app actually came out of this board and the staff on this board. So there, and we had it. So anyway, yeah,
okay.
it's, yeah, but so I'm glad you're aware of it. So let's move on to approval of the minutes. We have in front of us the minutes of the September 22nd meeting.
I don't believe we have the ability to vote on the minutes with only 2 votes.
Yeah. So that's, yeah, it's very funny because I think that's a Campbell thing, because I sit on state boards and they allow you to vote even if you were not present, but I think the city doesn't allow you to. So that's why I wanted to check, because I was chairing a state board earlier today. So I wanted to remember which rules are which. No, apparently you just don't have to be there as long as you're a voting member. So all right, so we will defer that. If we have a quorum, we can bring it up later. If not, we'll defer to a future meeting. Oral communications. Are there any individuals who wish to address the board on matters of community interest not listed on the agenda?
We have none.
Board staff announcements. Susan?
Do you want to go first?
I was going to introduce Abby. She's our temporary executive assistant covering for Kareen till we hire a permanent replacement. And I think you all know Andrea, who's helping out.
Okay, very good.
Good to meet you.
I have a couple of things actually. On, this has to do with, nope, Susan, what did you do? Wrong one. Okay, just a minute, got confused. I wanted to let the board know that I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Alan Hicks, and he is a member of the Ainslie family, the historic Ainslie family. And he wants to pursue getting landmark designation for the Ainslie Corporation headquarters, which is that little brick building on the other side, located at 43 Harrison Avenue. It is on the HRI, so the amount of work that he needs to do or support that he needs is not significant, but he does want to pursue it as soon as possible. He is concerned that it could be demolished for some reason out of his control, I guess. But anyway, I wanted to let you know that I had done that. I had met with him, and that I am also in contact with property owners of a historic resource home at 58 South 3rd Street. And they are looking into replacing some windows. And so I'm working with them, giving them parts of the design guidelines and some companies that work to give you the right architectural style that goes with the building, but it also gives you an upgrade on your heat and air and noise. So anyway, I want to let you know that those were two things that I was working on. That's all I have for now.
Great. Any other announcements? All right, seeing none, we'll move into new business. As you know, every year we elect a chair and vice chair. And so we're at that time, and I reached out to Mr. Walter just because I knew he may not be here. Because I've been chairing for a while and I enjoy chairing, but I also find it turn it over to somebody. And his view was he was fine with me staying. He was fine taking over. He was fine having you do it. So I think it's really, and I told him I didn't feel strongly one way or the other. So I mean, it was your first meeting, but so I kind of looked to you, Susan, as what you think would be the right course of action.
I had thought about this actually, and I would like to see you continue as chair if you are so inclined. And I would like to see Todd continue as vice chair. We've missed so many meetings. We've missed so much discussion, so much analytical information that we need to share back and forth because of COVID and whatnot, that I don't feel like you even had a chance to do your thing. And I think this happened last year as well. You were chair and I wanted you to be chair again. So that would be my recommendation, but I don't know if we can even vote on that this evening.
I believe we can, because I'm allowed to vote on this. I just can't make a motion or a second, right? So if that's the brothers, if anything that you want to share, I know it's your first meeting, so
I believe it's called a battlefield promotion. So may I make a motion?
you may.
But so I would, full name, sorry.
Mike.
Still learning these things. I make a motion to vote for Mike Folks to be the chair of this committee, the Historic Preservation Board, for a period of
Next year.
for a period of 12 months over the next year. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Do you want to amend that to include the vice chair as well?
Thank you. Get my feet wet here. Yes, and the vice chair would continue to be
Todd
Susan.
Walter.
Oh, okay. Todd Walter. I'll get this. Yes, so that is the motion,
Okay.
including the vice
All
chair.
right.
I will
The
revise my
seconder is all right with that?
Second,
Okay. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All right. Could we have a vote? Roll call, please.
Board Member Blake,
Yes. Hi.
Board Member Cordaway,
Aye.
Chair Focus.
All right. Stuck with me again for a year. Hopefully we'll get, we'll get the Mills Act done this year. It's my goal. So we have our meeting schedule. It's in your packet. It is similar to what we've done in the past with our monthly meeting on a regular schedule, skipping the November meeting because it falls on the holiday, and then moving up the December meeting to the first week. I think it's the 7th. So
I have no issue with that.
okay. The only thing I have is I will be here, I believe, for right now for every meeting except the March meeting. I will be out of the country. So, I can dial in from Europe, but if we notice it properly, but otherwise I will be missing that
Oh,
meeting.
that would
So
be
we'll
exciting.
make sure it'll be in the middle of the night, but that's all right. So that's the only conflict I saw, and I don't see a reason to move it as long as we have the quorum here. So any other thoughts on the? Okay. We don't make a motion to approve vacation. No. Haven't had one in a long time. All right, so motion to approve the 2022 meeting schedule.
Yes, I will make a motion to approve the 2022 Historic Preservation Board meeting schedules.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, could we have the roll call, please?
Board Member Blake,
Aye.
Board Member Cordaway,
Aye.
Chair Fulkus.
All right, excellent. So that's our new business. We now move to a public hearing. 705 El Patio Drive, Tier 1 Historic Resource Alteration Permit.
Apologies, that was actually a typographical error, but if you could read the project description into the record, please.
Sure. The public hearing, sorry, not yes. Public hearing to consider the application PLN 2021-70 of Nicholas and Andrea Key to rescind the listing of 705 El Patio Drive as a structure of merit from the City of Campbell Historic Resource Inventory. Staff is recommending that this project be deemed categorically exempt under CEQA.
Thank you. Just give me one moment. Okay. So this is a request by the property owners to rescind the historic designation of their property as 705 El Patio Drive from the City of Campbell Historic Resource Inventory. This property is located at the eastern terminus of El Patio. It was added to the HRI in 2012. It is an example of a Spanish colonial revival structure built in the late 1930s as part of the Rancho del Patio tract. The board considered the property at its September 2021 meeting for an application for a Tier 1 Historic Resource Alteration Permit for a 523 square foot rear addition to the structure. However, prior to the meeting, staff was made aware that certain alterations to the structure have been made that were not included in the scope of that application. So as such, as staff's request, that public hearing was continued to a date uncertain so that staff could follow up with the city's architectural advisor to determine the next course of action. In terms of the unpermitted alterations, as shown here, before and after photographs, removal of the box room columns and recessed casement windows, application of new stucco along the building that resulted in the loss of the original texture, creation of a new arched feature over the entryway, and new connected walls extending from either side of the building, very significantly altering the appearance of the home, almost to the extent that it's not recognizable from the original structure. So the city did contract with Mark Sandoval, who is the city's architectural advisor, who specializes in reviewing historic buildings and any historic related questions, to have them identify whether or not the structure still satisfies the criteria for listing on city's HRI. This is based on the criteria that's shown on the screen for a structure of merit. Mr. Sandoval did identify that there was a loss of historic integrity and that the city should consider removal of the property from the HRI. Staff does concur with Mr. Sandoval's conclusions in as much as maintaining a building that has lost its integrity on the HRI really diminishes the overall importance of the listing and somewhat undermines its purpose. Although Mr. Sandoval does identify it is possible to technically restore that facade work, Doing so still would result in effectively representation of the original and arguably still will not maintain its historic integrity to a sufficient degree to remain on the list. Therefore, staff does recommend that the Historic Preservation Board adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council rescind the designation of 705 El Patio Drive as a structure of merit from the Historic Resource Inventory. Just of note, staff does certainly recognize that this is an unfortunate situation, and we'll be addressing the matter with City Council in terms of a zoning code update that could provide greater penalties to deter unpermitted work in the future. And I believe we did send an invite to Mr. Sandoval for his input this evening. I'm looking to Andrea to see if he's signed on. Well, I think he is the MSA, so it looks like we do have Mr. Sandoval on the meeting. Should the board have any questions? Thank you.
Finish, we open public hearing, public can speak, including the applicant, and then, oh, sorry, thank you. I'm going to use that. And then we close the public hearing, and then we have discussion and deliberation.
So the one question I have is, getting used to it. The one question that I haven't, Daniel, maybe you could be the one to answer this is, there were various parts of the project that done in 2021, different parts. There were parts of that were cleared, with a permit, and then that there were various parts done that were not cleared, or it was just all done independent of a permit.
Sure. So the application last year was for the addition at the back of the house. That was separate than the work that had been performed earlier last year without a permit in terms of the facade alterations. So that work had not been approved.
So I've got a question, Daniel. So this was not work previously done. All of this work was done last year.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. So the work that had to come before this board was done without a permit at the same year as the applicant was filing a permit for an addition.
No. The application last year was for that 500 square foot addition. So that work has not been done.
No, but I mean that they were the same year that the applicant filed for a permit. So knowing that a permits are required in the city to do construction, that same year this.
Later in the year, yes.
Okay, so they filed for a building permit and then did unpermitted work after that.
No. So the facade work had been done in early 2021. Then the application for the addition that was submitted subsequently later in the year.
Okay, so, all right, that's what I was trying to understand. So this was all done recently.
Yeah.
I assume by the same homeowner.
Correct.
So do we know if it was done by the same contractor?
That I do not know.
Okay. So the historical pieces of the house were taking out at, well, I'll say applicant this, but in terms of time, roughly the same time period within a few months that an addition was contemplated.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
We'll open public hearing in a moment.
So what we're going down on record saying is that the work that was actually completed in 2021, not that which was, applied for permit wise, but the work that was actually done, none of that was permitted.
Correct. So in the photographs, the work from the before and after, that work would have required a building permit. And the scope of it was to such an extent that that facade work itself would have also required a historic resource alteration permit as well. And those two things were not approved.
And there's no legal requirement for the the contractor to, you know, check to see if the work that they have done or that they're about to do was permitted. Is that how the law works in this matter?
Well, maybe Director Eastwood, but generally the obligation falls to the property owner to
Okay.
ensure that the law is being followed on their property in terms of their contractors. But that's not to say that the contractor doesn't avoids any liability, because they are licensed professionals and doing work that requires a permit. Without a permit is a problem,
Yeah,
but that's outside the scope of this board.
understood.
Okay, any other questions, staff or Mr. Sandoval? All right, so let's open up the public hearing, and I believe the applicant is here.
Well, thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be live. Haven't met most of you in person. Susan, you and I met at my property when you visited back in September. So nice to see you again. Rob, nice to meet you in person. We had talked just on the phone yesterday. And Mike, we hadn't gotten the chance to speak directly or connect. But it is a pleasure to be here. I think it is worthwhile providing clarity around some of the misunderstandings that you all just discussed here. And so I would love to give some perspective in terms of background on this project, dating back to really when it was put on the inventory and where I took ownership of it and what I've done so far, where we're kind of at with everything. As Daniel noted, it was added to the HRI in 2012, my property, 705 El Patio. Interestingly, at the same exact time as 58 South 3rd Street, which you just mentioned doing a project with now, and at the same time as 649 El Patio Drive that was previously owned by Mark Sandoval, who wrote our evaluation report. He had sold it to the current owner who put it on the HRI at 2012. It was not added to the HRI when Mark Sandoval was the owner. There are, in my opinion, as an owner, a number of lack of benefits to me in terms of maintaining it on the HRI. And my belief is that as an owner, I should have privileges over my property that I think I'm not afforded currently. The obvious sort of argument in the other direction would, of course, be the Mills Act, and that potentially being a benefit to property owners of homes on the HRI. In the 2.5 years that I've had ownership of the house, going back to late 2019, I haven't been able to put my home on the Mills Act because there's limited capacity in this city, massive wait list. There's 10 spots or something total on the Mills Act. We've got almost 200 properties on the HRI. I've been told it's not likely that I will get on the Mills Act. I will not reap the benefits financially, which in my opinion is really the only purpose of, or really the only potential benefit for an HRI property. It was also made sort of relevant to me when I spoke with Todd Walter last week about this same initiative, that likely to increase capacity on the Mills Act list for me to be able to join amongst all of the other waitlisted applicants would be 3 to 5 year process. And again, just deferring my ability to take advantage of any benefits. I understand you all have your objectives here on this board to maintain historic integrity within the city of Campbell. It's one of the reasons why I love Campbell. Obviously, the historic nature of the downtown is fantastic. I don't think my flea speck little property in a back neighborhood is really significant, nor does Mark Sandoval's report indicate that it's significant in terms of a district neighborhood or even the property itself anymore. I think in the 2012 minute summary, which I don't know if you all have had the chance to actually look at, but it was included in Daniel's packet. it provides background in terms of when it was originally put on. It was the original owners of 705 El Patio were at first undecided when asked to put their home on the inventory. It took place over 3 or 4 meetings or so where the owner did not necessarily agree, and then made the stipulation of, okay, I will consider it, but I want to have the ability to pull it out of consideration at any point, which, per the notes provided in Daniel's package for that meeting in 2012, is exactly what it said, that it could be pulled off with full support of the board if requested by the owner. In terms of, and if that sort of privilege is passed down to me as the next owner, I'd love to take advantage of it and just have full support of the board. That may or may not be the case, but that's what was decided at the time. Since I purchased the house with my wife in 2019, after having lived in the exact same neighborhood for 5 years, we literally moved from our previous front door 200 feet down the street. It was our intention to buy this property in order to expand it dramatically. It is a very small house at only 1,000 square feet. It is a very large property at over 1/3 of an acre. I'm going to add more than 100% of the current size of the house. That is my goal for it. In Mark Sandoval's report, he notes that amongst the changes that I've already made will continue to reduce its historic sort of integrity over time as I continue to reach my goals to support the needs of my growing family. When we bought the house, we did unfortunately hire kind of a cut rate realtor who didn't really explain the responsibilities of owning a historic home. And in fact, in some ways inspired my wife to become a realtor, which she is now. And we're now much more aware of some of the detractors or negative impacts of owning a historic home, which are decreased property value, being that you can't make certain changes. Didn't know that at the time. We do now. It's actually, maybe a blessing in disguise in that there were no developer interest in the property because they knew they couldn't turn it into 2 or 3 homes, being that the lot was so big because they couldn't touch the existing structure for the most part. It's just a negative impact on the value itself, which again is obviously not a benefit for me. Our first objective when buying the house was to provide aesthetic value to the neighborhood in terms of the front of the house. If you have taken a close look at the before pictures, it was in really, really shabby shape. It was owned by someone who hadn't been to the home in over 20 years, was renting it out. It was in disrepair. It was disgusting. Our first order of business, because we have such interest in our very neighborhood, having been there for 7.5 years now, was making a number of changes, which Mark Sandoval notes in page 7 of his report. That includes, I could actually read them off. It says the entrance to the home accessed by the driveway, which was put in by us. That was actually a permitted job that we did go to the city for in 2019. It was approved by the Public Works Division. Poured that driveway. It's also accessed by straight brick paved narrow walkway that terminates at a half circle, tile and brick entrance underneath the entryway. Those brick pathways were put in by me. The tiled half circle was put in by me. The stucco wall that was mentioned surrounding the home now was put in by me. All of those things were brought up to the city at the time when I poured my driveway. And in fact, a previous member of the planning department at the time had said that I was not required to have a permit for any of that hardscaping work, including the big stucco wall that I built around the place, as long as if it was, under 6 feet, which is kind of the general requirement. So I hired a day labor to build a brick wall for me, or a stucco wall. It's a cement wall. When doing that and texturing the new wall surrounding my property, I also asked him to complete the texturing of the entire facade so that it was all matching and was a seamless transition. This was, obviously at the time an inadvertent overstep on my part. I didn't realize, what was involved in terms of, or what I couldn't do in terms of retexturing my house to make it match with the new wall. And in that, amongst a couple of the other changes that I made, also noticeably that the 3 box columns, the trims for those were knocked down as part of that. That decision was made because of a previous report, historic report on the property back in, I think, probably 2012 when it was put on, that said a recessed entryway is set between molded columns that appear embedded into the front facade, a detail not typical to the style. I had access to that report when I bought the home. I knocked down those column features because they were not typical to the style and didn't resonate with the Spanish Revival. So that was kind of the reasoning for it. Understanding, again, these were inadvertent missteps, but we kind of are where we are. I think Mark Sandoval's report does a pretty thorough job of specifying that the integrity that may have been lost with the changes that I made, inadvertent as they were, cannot be restored because there are certain materials, craftsmanships, things like that that go into it, which just aren't, feasible to actually replace. In April of last year, and actually, so to sum up, those changes were actually made in late 2019 when we bought the house. And you can look back at the driveway permit that I had. And so it wasn't that I purposefully made changes without the city's permission and then almost backhandedly applied for new permits for an addition. That wasn't the case. These were years apart, and there was interaction with the city at the time when I made the initial changes. Again, what was necessary from a historic standpoint just was not made clear to me at that time. In April of 2021, when Daniel and I first started talking about putting on an addition to the home, I was upfront about these changes. I had told him about the restuccoing, about some of the other changes that were made, albeit likely my fault. I may not have conveyed the severity of the changes, again, out of unwillingness or unknowingness, I would say. And so it wasn't until September when pictures were provided of my property that became obvious. And then we looked at the opportunity to actually rescind, which was my original intention in April. So we've come full circle almost a year later. And I think looking at Mark Sandoval's report as the historic expert and as a previous board member of the Historic Preservation Board, on the first page of his report, he aims to really satisfy the city's question of, if we were to replace or undo what's been done, will it remain historic? And then should it just be taken off of the list? He says to answer the above questions, one must first determine if this home at 705 El Patio Drive merits being listed on the historic resource inventory with 2 purposes. Number 1, assuming the past non-permitted alterations had not been performed, which they have, of course. And number 2, enough historic homes remained along El Patio Drive to qualify as a potential historic district that this property had once been associated with. If we immediately go to the following page where he notates the 6 total homes that were of the exact same style and of the same designer as mine, one of those has been bulldozed to the ground and replaced with a larger home. 2 of those were, I think, declined in a previous effort to get them on the list. 2 of them were put on, and mine, of course, I already gave some of the background on that. It was sort of put on with a stipulation. It goes on to say on page 4, the El Patio Drive itself, the street that my house is on, does not meet the criteria A1 standards to qualify as a potential historic district. I think that immediately disproves the second purpose that Mark Sandoval lists on the front page, which is enough historic homes remain on El Patio Drive to qualify as a potential historic district. It is not. On page 7 of his report, Mark goes on to discuss the criteria of the National Register, which must include most of 7 different aspects. Location, which we know it does not because it is not a historic district, as I just mentioned. Design, which we know it does not meet because those changes have been made. Setting, not sure. Materials, we know it does not because those changes have been made. Workmanship, we know does not and cannot be regained because the workmanship is different these days for contractors. Feeling, as Daniel has mentioned and as Mark represents in his report, looks like 2 completely different homes. And association. He goes on to say it must possess most of the above aspects in order to remain relevant in the capacity of this thing. His opinion and recommendation is also listed. And to summarize, he says, it is my opinion that such measures will probably not measures meaning undoing what's been done, will probably not add any additional historic value to the property. And the new room addition currently proposed will also fall to the same sort of detriment. Therefore, it is his opinion that the city should consider removing it from the historic inventory. The city, in support of Mark Sandoval's recommendation, has, I think, paraphrased in the packet today using words like ineligible to be on the inventory. The staff is supportive and goes on to find that really removal has no adverse effect to the city itself.
And thank you very much for your presentation. Just the question, is this the portion where we would make our statements or just purely?
This is just questions, and then we'll close the public hearing. And we'll close it after anyone else. Somebody wants to speak. I don't see a huge crowd here.
Yeah,
And then public will be closed, and then we'll have discussion.
yeah. Okay, thank you. So, and just the question is just a confirmation from your side that you had been in communication throughout the years since you bought the home, with the, with the planning department, about making certain changes. And you did get feedback on those. You did make the effort to contact the city of Campbell about the changes you were making.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to turn this on. I've got a couple. So you're correcting that the timeline here, that you said the unpermitted alterations happened in 2019, not in 2021.
Correct.
So they were already completed before this addition was proposed or even envisioned.
Yes.
Who was the contractor you used?
As I said, it was a day of labor just to pour the cement.
Well, I understand for the wall, but you had structural work done on the house by a day laborer?
No, there was no structural work ever done to the house.
Okay, roofing the columns is not structural?
There was just 2x4 trims on the outside that I knocked off myself. It wasn't structural. They weren't real columns. The same exact structure there is today. Those box frame columns that are referred to in the report were just finishes. They were just trim pieces. They weren't actual columns. Nothing structural was done.
And the changing out of windows was done by a day laborer?
That's correct.
Is there a reason you didn't want to hire somebody with skills to do that kind of highly kind of, skill required work?
I don't know that installing windows is something that requires high skill. There's also a massive shed in the back of my property that the previous renters pulled out all of the windows and doors. I installed new windows and doors myself. It's really easy stuff. The fact that I had to replace the windows when I first bought the house was because of the fact that they were the original single pane steel frame windows that did not close, that had cracks and broken panes in them, to the point where my, at the time, under 1-year-old son would not be able to live in the home. Wasn't insulated, there's no protection against wind flow. But it was all very minimal skill work that was done. No
And so
structure.
you said that you weren't aware of any of the rules, but you are now because your wife is a Realtor. Is that correct?
I'm aware now because I brought it up to Daniel last year and said, you know, hey, I want to do this addition. I understand things need to get permitted for. As I said, I went to the city for the driveway permit. I went to the city for the wall permit, which wasn't required. And I went to the city for the addition permit. What I didn't know is that applying new structure over the home was required for a permit. So those became obvious once Daniel and I started talking.
Okay. And you mentioned that you install windows. Are you in the construction industry?
No.
You just do it as a hobby?
It's a hobby to install windows.
No, I'm just asking, like, how is your expertise in windows? How you thrive that? Is it something you enjoy doing on the side, or it's something you do professionally?
I'm relatively well equipped in terms of my handiness around a home to fix certain things like that. I don't find installing windows to be particularly difficult.
Okay.
That's just a different set of knowledge, I guess.
Okay. And did you, so when all these changes happened, so as I understand the timeline, so you went to the city to get a wall permit and they said you didn't need one, neither for paving nor for building the walls. Is that, now I'm surprised at that, Daniel, is that, it seems to me a stucco wall as opposed to, you know, a backyard fence repair does that not require a permit?
So two things. The height of this wall likely did require a permit, and its attachment to the house also would have required a permit. If you simply build a fence, a 6-foot fence, that does not require a permit. But if you build a wall, if I'm recalling, more than 3.5 feet, that does require a building permit, and the attachment to the house would have been, even if that were not the case of requiring a building permit, its attachment would have constituted an alteration to the house, which would have still triggered the need for some level of historic review.
So it's a 6-foot wall, which as long as it's 15 feet offset from the sidewalk is allowed without permit. I don't know about attaching it to the house. That wasn't specified to me, at least by the previous person in the planning department at the time. For the 3-foot part where it swoops down and is closer to the sidewalk, you could have a 3-foot wall right on your sidewalk. Also, no need for permit.
So if I can just clarify, there's kind of two different aspects. He's conflating the zoning code requirements for the placement of walls and fences proximate to property lines and building code requirements to obtain a permit. So just because something may not necessarily need a permit, you still need to comply with the zoning standards and vice versa.
That's what I want to get. Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? All right, thank you.
Do we have, by the way, enough people to actually make a decision on this today, being that two
Yes.
people are, okay, thank you. Is that it in terms of the back and
Yeah,
forth?
so we'll see if there's any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item. All right, seeing none, we'll close public hearing. Go ahead and sit down. All right, bring it back.
Oh, actually, I would like to speak.
Oh.
Hello, my name is Katie Corwin. I'm actually a neighbor from across the street. I'm at 203 Poplar Avenue, right across from the property in discussion this evening. And I joined today in support of the work that they've done. As someone who has lived on this street for north of 10 years now, I also used to rent one of the townhouses across the road and then ended up purchasing our house over here a couple years back. But it has completely revamped the way that someone who drives down the street will take in our street. We believe it's increasing the property values. People have told us while coming to our property that they appreciate the aesthetic that has been done to the property in question today. And we just sincerely appreciate what they're doing to really make this a great place for our children to grow up in.
What rule is it following to say his time expired?
It's the chair's discretion. Well, time expired because the public hearing is expired. Normally you give people 3 minutes, obviously with this, with only one item here, right? We don't have
Gotcha.
as much time as we need, but I mean, if there's no other questions, the applicant. If you have more questions.
Good.
yes.
Oh, okay. Understood. Okay. The procedure is such that he had his opportunity to share, and then once we went on to the public aspect, then that at that point sort of stopped his time to share.
The public is allowed to speak. And then when the public is finished, and if we have no more questions of the public, then close the public hearing. And the public does not have another opportunities.
Okay.
My final comment was just per the suggestion of Todd Walters.
What are you disappointed at?
The outcome. Proposed outcome.
Mike,
Oh, sorry. I'm disappointed with the proposed outcome, but I think it's likely to happen. And that's all I got to say.
Looking at cover.
No, I didn't. I hear you.
So I know, we still Mr. Sandoval, but so Susan, what are your thoughts on, I mean, I read Mr. Sandoval's report. I agree with the purity aspect. I also look at several of the projects we've seen where, as part of the approval process, we do ask that, windows that were put in later be replaced by wooden windows, right? That columns be corrected, that stucco be matched, that things that are additions are treated differently so that there is, you can tell which is the original structure of the house and which isn't. So, well, I understand the Mr. Sandoval's view that kind of a lot has been done. I just am, since you've been on the board, much longer than I have, whether on this project you feel that it's something that there should be some historical pieces that remain. As the applicant said, right, the goal is to scrape the property and build something much larger, which, understandably, property owner has property owner's goal. But I think the question for us as the preservation board with a structure on the list is there a creative remedy here to at least maintain some of the value of the historic structure or not? And I look to you because you've been doing this a lot longer.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm on so many changes that were what made the house unique in so many ways have been altered or changed. The windows, the door, the frame, the steps in the front, the walkway. Just so many things have changed, and to put it back doesn't make sense to me at this point. I would hope that the owner at least maintains the chimney. The top of the chimney is really unique, and that's one of the features that drew me to that property to begin with, way back in 2012, 11, something like that. No, I don't see the point at this point of trying to make something that isn't happening. What do you think?
Well, again, I think, obviously, I'm troubled with the timeline and the facts of this case, right? I don't know that I'm fully supporting the narrative. And I don't want us to be in a situation where this becomes a precedent in this town.
Mm.
So I understand the architectural problems here. From a policy perspective, it seems like, you know, it is not the case of benign neglect on a property, which we've seen so many
Right,
times here,
right.
which is bad in and of itself. It is, you know, changing the actual property in a way that I don't know. I mean, I hire a contractor if I have to have a fence repaired, let alone building, you know, attachments to my house. So that's, you know, it seems there should have been. I'm very surprised that there wasn't some type of professional, you know, hired to do this. That just it doesn't seem that just doesn't to me seem plausible. But again, I have no alternative facts, so and I'm not going to case the neighborhood and ask them. So I think we're just, you know, well, we are or we're not. I mean, you know, as the staff mentioned in the report, we can, you know, seek to see what a report on what it would look like to repair the things, right, and put it back to the way it was. So there are alternatives. I mean, there is an alternative in the staff report. I think it's a question of what we want to do. And I almost wonder, because this is such a big precedent and we're missing 2 members, if this is something that we want to defer until we have the full board here to talk about. Because I do think it's just, you know, it's not just about this one property. I think this sets.
Lesson learned.
Right. Well, but again, you know, until the council kind of works on fixing this, so it can't happen again, or if it does, there are severe consequences. I would love to hear from our full board on where they want to go. That's just my 2 cents. I'm troubled as you are with the, you know, I don't see an easy fix to this, as we see sometimes in other proposals. But I also, I guess I mean, again, I know it's your first meeting, so this is like going through a fire hose. It's just like when we had that first Millsack application, and I had regrets afterwards being new on the board because I didn't really understand the impact of approving that when we had then subsequent ones coming and having to go between those. I think this is that same type of situation for me where it's like, I understand the bad facts here, but I don't, you know, bad facts, you know, shouldn't make bad law. So, so that's kind of where I am, which is kind of between a rock and a hard place.
And so
My belief is that, you know, we're not here to value judge somebody's, you know, intentions and of what they were doing. You know, I choose to believe innocent intent of a man who was, you know, did take steps to respect the laws and, you know, and was in contact with the city of Campbell. And that he was essentially trying to make his home, you know, a better place for his family. And it's not, I don't even want to make it a money issue, because our goal is not to increase the property values in the city. That's not the goal. We have a greater, I think we have a greater goal. And that goal is not to just keep a property on the list. You know, I think the greater goal is to, you know, make the city a great place to live. We've talked about, like, yeah, there's a policy issue here, right? You know, because that's out of the scope of this, and that's something that we would need to work on separately. And I don't think, you know, we should make residents, you know, sort of, you know, beholden to, you know, the fact that there needs to be a policy issue addressed. The 2 items that we have to vote on put us in the same place in the end. That's the way I read this. Either way, you know, if the way I read this, and Danny, if I'm wrong, like, it seems that either way, okay, if forced to sort of undo the changes that were made, this no longer qualifies to be on the list. And then the other option is to remove it from the list. So it's like the two options are kind of, as I see it, get us to the same place, which is, to me, again, a policy issue, and we shouldn't make, the community subject to that. If we look at the intent of a board like this, is to, again, just, make this a great place to live and to respect the history, just working to keep a property on the list, doesn't necessarily accomplish that. Yes, the changes that were made increased the property value, absolutely. And again, we're not here to just, want to increase property values, but, aesthetically, community wise, take the property value aside, it's a better home, in my opinion. And again, we're not here to sort of, value judge and, determine what if somebody's intent, was to break the rules, because I choose not to believe that was the case. And so I will, my opinion is that the changes that were made it a more attractive neighborhood. And if we look at a greater good of what a government is here to do, I think that's not a bad outcome. The issue of precedent being set, that is a sticky issue, right? Because then what's to say that people all over the city don't go and do unpermitted changes if and I think that that's something that's, again, the community should not be beholden to, they shouldn't have to slow down their lives or change things because there are policy issues. Again, that part's outside of this board's purpose. We can bring that up with city council, we can bring that up with whatever entities need be, but I don't think the community should be subject to policy issues. And I'll stop at that.
Dang it. I'd like to ask our new board member what he thinks about your idea of having the full board here to discuss this rather than trying to make a decision this evening. Todd Walter and Laura Moore.
And given that would add two additional experienced voices to the argument, I can't disagree with I'm one to aim for efficiency and quickness where appropriate, but I don't want to do that and sacrifice sort of a quality of an opinion. So I would, as a democratic process, I think that's a good idea, but then I would ask, the rules of the committee as documented require 3 voters out of 5, correct?
Yes. Quorum.
And there are 3 voters here.
Yes.
And we do have the freedom to, opine to say, even though we have the quorum here, we do have the freedom to say, let's get more opinions. We do have that freedom, right? And so I think for it's a small house, but it's a big issue, but it's a potentially big issue. And to say nothing of not value judging anything that occurred, it's a small house, but a big issue that could set a dangerous precedent. And so I think for something like that, I would say it makes sense to just get more input. That's it. And it's not to penalize. It's just, we need to be thoughtful. It's the Historic Preservation Board. History takes time. Sometimes decisions take time. So I would not disagree with what you are suggesting to get more input, particularly from people that have more experience on this.
I will attempt to make a motion that we continue this item to the next Historic Preservation Board meeting, which is February
23rd.
23rd. Hopefully, we will have a full group here at that meeting to discuss this and make a motion about what we should do.
Okay, so second.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
Board Member Blake,
Yes.
Board Member Cordaway,
Yes.
Chair Folkus.
Get the full board on that and make sure that I will do some dialogue and make sure it wasn't a here. All right, so
Can we add to the record that we're going to do our best efforts to get everybody here?
Yeah, that's what he was just saying.
we didn't have a member in the hospital with his wife.
Okay, okay.
I don't know.
All right, so moving on to old business, Mills Act Subcommittee report.
Okay, I can give you some information. Todd may have had something, but I haven't had a chance to talk with him. I can tell you, is my mic on? It is. Okay. I can tell you that the Mills Act site visits were completed in mid-December with photo documentation of all existing conditions based on the work plan items. Photos were sent to Daniel, and I made a thumb drive of all the photos for each property owner and gave it to them. I was contacted by 2 property owners who recently bought homes that are on the HRI. I gave them DPR sheets and sections of the design guidelines for their particular architectural style. They're both interested in applying for the Mills Act. I explained that all the contracts had been claimed for the time being, that we were working on getting more. So that's what I can tell you about that.
And if I could add, the 3 contracts that were approved by the city council last year have been signed. They are not yet recorded because we need to prepare notices of non-renewal that would terminate the contracts in 10 years. The city does not have a template for that. We're trying to find an example of one. Luckily, the CLG listserv that connects historic planners and preservationists throughout the state, it was offline for a little while last year for some technical issues, but we actually received word this week that it's now active again. So I sent out a inquiry to my colleagues, and hopefully someone in the state of California can provide me an example. If I don't hear back in the next week or 2, we'll just need to contact our city attorney and just create one from scratch.
Okay. I am looking into the city of Whittier, California, because they have an excellent Mills Act program with some limitations, 10-year limitations, and I'm going to be asking them if they can loan us, give us, show us the template for that. So I'll follow up on that. So yeah, I think that's it. I do have one question, and it's unrelated to this. I want to know, with our new member, if there's any way we can get the city website updated with the board, for boards and commissions, so that it shows who's really on them now, because there's people that haven't been on for a while and their name is still on there.
We'll certainly do
So,
that.
Thank you.
I think the only update I have is we had the chairs had a meeting. Gibbons and word after presence, that she was very excited about. Very proud of her. And part of my report, this came up and explaining our goal to make the process much more tighter, much having much more accountability, and to request more. I think there was a general sense that, you know, do that part first, tighten it up, make it better. But
We've done quite a bit, but we're kind of waiting on a few things.
the only other thing I wanted to share is Daniel and I talked ahead of this meeting about the fact that the planning staff is kind of decimated at the moment at the city, and so we can continue to work as our subcommittee and doing independent work on this, but from a staff resource standpoint, there are a whole lot of other things that are higher in priority. So,
Yep.
So this may have to take a little bit of a pause. City staff's back up, so which is understandable. And obviously, we want to make sure that
Yeah.
This is
Do it right.
important, but it's not urgent. So,
Right. It's not an emergency.
any other thoughts?
And I'll probably add, though, this application with El Patio certainly bringing to light probably a more urgent issue in terms of tightening up the permitting process and the penalties to discourage what happened for the future. So that'll most likely have to take precedence over a Mills Act update in terms of staff time.
Understood.
All right. Seeing no further business, we will